Hi there. This is a response to Corey's video on the issue of free speech and the right to be heard. I want to look at it from the idea of rights because I think that we see in it more wreckage on the rocks of duality. When conflict arises as we stumble our way through life, it is often helpful to examine the problem for some dualistic fallacy. Are we misapprehending the issue because of our dualistic thinking? If it were, it would be little surprise because language itself is fundamentally dualistic, and that goes for the concepts that language enables as well. Words divide into this and not this. This has long been intuited by thinkers. For example, the inspired poets of Genesis at the beginning of the Judeo-Christian branch of our Western tradition, when we got chucked out of the non-divisive Eden. So, how might a consideration of the nature of free speech benefit by a non-dualistic analysis? Freedoms or rights have become a bit of a fetish in our age. We rise up in righteous indignation at the suggested threat to any one of them. The 20th century has been the century of enshrining rights, from the United Nations Convention on Human Rights through conventions of many countries to the rights of those oppressed due to, for example, their gender or sexuality or colour. This emphasis on rights is both necessary and beneficial to correct their neglect in the past, but its exclusive emphasis is problematic. Yes, we do need a way to mitigate our tendency to alienate, assimilate or annihilate the other, as part, for example, of Ernest Becker's Denial of Death project. Some of the so-called wars on YouTube at present can be seen as a struggle for self-validation, and in them we see all the tactics that Becker described. But when these protections of our rights are enshrined in commandments or laws, they are then at the mercy of those laws and appear as if they derive from the law. But as we see from history, rights have been frequently abused or totally ignored lawfully. In fact, all our current freedoms required an overturning of an earlier oppressive law. Sure, the laws of civil society and social contract are helpful in enforcing fair behaviour, but they do little to nurture it, just as the heaven-hell myth constrains good behaviour for self-serving reasons. Virtue is bribed with heaven and vice is punished with hell. But the higher way would be a virtue because of one's compassion for the other. This is a path of freedom which is higher than the law and has not yet been advocated sufficiently. Rule-based virtue quickly becomes a debate on compliance to the letter and blindness to the spirit. But the very concept of rights is categorically peculiar. Are our so-called rights any more real than, say, a lion's right to eat a gazelle, or that gazelle's right not to be dinner? Such talk of rights seems strangely inappropriate when applied to an animal, a living animal. What's different then when it's applied to us? Maybe if we look at where rights come from historically, we might get some ideas. In the two formative sources of our Western tradition, we can distinguish two main streams, each of which offers a different analysis. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, we get from Genesis, I think chapter 1, verse 27, that God created man in his own image. This is the origin of the theology of man's dignity, arising from our being the image of God. Thus, what we call rights are unalienable because they are divine, not of human origin. Man doesn't give them, and man can't remove them. They are our birthright. But now, though, we live in an increasingly secular world where this explanation of divine origin just doesn't wash for many people. On the other hand, we look at our latest Genesis myth, evolution, and we find the shadow of rights have evolved in a reciprocal altruism that has emerged in primates and that we have inherited. And this leads to an argument for rights we get from another one of the strands of our Western tradition, the Greco-Roman tradition. In Plato's Crito, for example, it is by appealing to human compassion that Socrates explains to Crito why he refuses to escape his execution. He personifies the laws of civil society in a character he calls the laws of Athens, then argues on her behalf on the grounds of respect for her feelings that we owe her. Our rights as citizens are indivisible from the duty we have to respect all legally arrived at laws without exception. The reason? We have a duty to the law because it protects our rights. If we refuse its restrictions, then we have no right to its protections and should leave the jurisdiction if we can't change that law. In this, which is the first expression of the social contract in Western thought, we see the thread that we must now rediscover. That is the indivisibility of rights and duties. And we need to be reminded of this unity, rather than the one-sided emphasis on rights without explicit recognition that they not only imply, but are, from a different perspective, duties. I think that the debate about rights of expression, no censorship, freedom from idiots, is so fraught today because we are making two transitions. First, from religious law, based on an understanding of man's rights deriving from his dignity as being in the image of God, and secondly, from the need to enforce altruistic respect by giving it the force of law in the form of rights. But when we step back from seeing rights as distinct from duties and see them as one, we notice that my right to free expression implies others' rights to it too. And there are two ways I can attack this right for others, either by denying it to them, or importantly, by using my rights delinquently, and thus undermining it as a good. So speech that is intended to harm or undermine another person is unskillful and abusive, even in retaliation, and it undermines freedoms for all. As to enforcement, it's not by code or law or commandment. These are all finally disempowering. Virtue has to be nurtured, not commanded. As I suggested earlier, we can profitably view our so-called rights with their duties arising from our evolutionary roots. Primate studies of reciprocal altruism, for example, show that evolution's solution is not enforcement by law, but by social pressure. There always are and always will be freeloaders, those who abuse altruistic rights. In primate societies, the sanction is some degree of shunning. The freeloader is marginalised, starved of attention. If this is inherent in humans too, as it seems to be, then maybe it's the best way to treat those who refuse to accept the need in their use of freedoms, like speech, to respect their duties to collective harmony. This is energised by compassion, not compulsion. Laws may compel behaviour to respect others, but not the heart. Only the respectful heart will solve the problems we face with the duties-rights split. We can't make our social actions 100% respectful, but in denying freedoms to those who abuse them, we make them alienable. We have to stop glamorising disrespect, unskillful language, and shun its use if we hope to increase the chance of skillful, constructive, respectful interaction. That's the way that the rights of mankind, which are also the duties of mankind, are strengthened and valued. And in the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln, it's where they will be touched again, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Thanks.